What is up, everyone? It is an exciting day in the Red Sea. We have a general manager not named Steve Keim for the first time in a long time. And I am joined by my friend Troy Honecker. Thank you for being here, Troy. How are you, sir?
I'm good. Yeah, it's, the vibes are up these days, at a good press conference. We'll go into it later, but, his hiring is like a history franchise breaking almost, this is a new world, a new era, as it were. But yeah, I'm excited to talk about it and excited to start the new year off on a good foot.
Nice. Yeah, me too. I am excited about the change. We'll talk about that more. We're joined by some folks already in the chat. Thanks for being here. We got Tony Height, Frank Riker, Brian Flores. We'll talk about this later. Maybe both or neither. We'll see. We got Grandizer holding down the chat. Thank you for all that you do, Grandizer. Appreciate you. Chris says no, Frank Reich. Marcus Langoni says kind of like Frank Reich. Mono 187 says Reich is greater than Flores. There's a lot of opinions about the coaches, potential coaches, and we will get to that. So let's kind of do a little quick kind of, synopsis for anyone who's not been following the news. And I think if you're here, you probably have to some degree at least, of what's gone on in Cardinals land. So obviously, recently it was announced that Monti Ossenfort was hired as the Cardinals general manager. He came to us from the Tennessee Titans organization. And, this is just his Wikipedia kind of, career history as an executive. He had a couple stints as an intern, which is often that's how people kind of start out their, front office career, getting coffee, cutting film, doing whatever they can, wherever they can, with the Vikings and the Texans and the Patriots, then a job with the Texans. And then he came back to the Patriots. And this is really, I would say, the defining stretch of his career. Starting as an area scout, then a national scout, then assistant director of college scouting, and then finally as a director of college scouting for the New England Patriots from 2006 through 2019, a stretch in which they won 4 Super Bowls. And it's an organization that's widely respected in terms of how they build their rosters and their drafting. They struggle with receivers and maybe running back sometimes in the draft. But in terms of drafting offensive linemen and defensive players, and in particular, I think they're really good in from rounds 2 on. Maybe their first round picks are a little hit and miss, depending on they haven't missed on all of them like we have, it seems like. But they're better in the later rounds, but they also value like second round picks a lot if you follow the way the Patriots do things. And you build a good roster that way. Those later rounds are vital. So, this is where he cut his teeth. And from his experience there, he moved on to the Tennessee Titans, and he was director of player personnel. And then he was brought here. Some people have criticized, his time with Tennessee because of the A.J. Brown trade. He didn't, he wasn't the general manager. He didn't make that trade. To what degree he was involved, who knows? I suspect, though, his role with the Titans was probably more focused on scouting in the draft. But I tweeted something about this. I'm a believer in process over results, that you get the right process in place and you will have good results long-term. If you base your decisions over short-term results, the ebbs and flows of things can skew that. So, every general manager makes some bad moves. So even if he was involved in the A.J. Brown trade that people panned them for, I'm not going to make a decision based on that. I'm going to look at the fact that he's learned a good set of processes with the Patriots, and I want to take a chance on that kind of guy. So then, I tweeted something else about him, just from, things I've observed, and I think is pretty common knowledge about the Patriots. I don't think there's anything in here that's all that revelation oriented, but, if Ossenfort does things the Patriots way, don't expect big splash signings in free agency. That's not something the Pats have done typically, once in a while, but they do a lot of signing their own, building through the draft. And then what they do is they go sign guys who are mid-tier free agents that fit what they do, and they get really good results from it. Like Matthew Judon is an example that he wasn't like a big splash signing, but look what he's done in their system, right? That's what they do. And then I also, mentioned here, they're also known for preferring to be out a year early rather than a year too late on players. They're more likely, they don't want to be caught too late. They'll, and sometimes that becomes a miss for them. But certainly, they cut Chandler Jones, loose way too early, but they still traded and got something for him at least, right? That's better than being out a year too late. But they've also, a lot of times that's worked out for them, right? On players that go somewhere else, get big money, and don't end up working out. So the point for that is don't expect aging vets, which is something that the Cardinals have kind of built the rosters on in a problematic way. So then, one thing I want to throw a shout out here to Grimdark, someone who's a supporter of the channel and a member of the Discord. And he posted in Discord here a quote that's from a Darren Urban article about Monti Ossenfort's hire. And says, other than Buddy Ryan's tenure as head coach and GM in 1994 and 1995, Ossenfort is the first Cardinals GM to be hired from outside the organization since Joe Sullivan came from Washington to man the role from 1973 to 1979. Larry Wilson was in charge from 1980 through 93. And after Ryan, Bob Ferguson, Rod Graves, and Keim were all promoted from within the team. And we talked about this a little bit earlier. We can talk about this more. But bringing someone in from the outside is long overdue. And, if the one GM they brought from outside is Buddy Ryan at coach / GM, that's not the right thing. That's not solving the problem. So they brought someone in from outside who's going to bring a new set of processes. So then they had the press conference and he talked about his vision for the team, some of the things that, that drew him to this job, some of his plans and such. And, and he answered questions from the media. And overall, I think drew pretty favorable reviews from people. People really seem to like him from everything I've seen and heard online from the feedback. And again, we can talk about that more and your views on that. And then he did the standard photo op stuff at the end with Michael Bidwell and then with his family. And I did a poll on my YouTube channel community page. And generally, it was pretty favorable. There were 8% of people who loved the hire. 68% said they were optimistic. 22%, I'm not so sure about this guy. And 1% hated it. And it's worth noting that I put this poll up before the press conference. So I'd be curious how much, this might have changed if it was just after the press conference, because there was a lot of positive kind of, reaction to that. And then, with his connections, though, with the Patriots, there's been a lot of speculation that Brian Flores is now might be considered the leading candidate for the job because he worked with Monti Ossenfort during his time in New England. And, I will tell you from what I have seen, the fan reaction to that has been negative by and large. Some people are lukewarm on it, but most people I'm seeing commenting seem to be opposed to that. Now, maybe that's just the vocal, minority speaking up there. But a couple other quick notes, and then we'll get into, your thoughts, Troy. Former Colts coach Frank Reich interviewed today for the Arizona Cardinals open head coaching position per sources, tweeted out by Dan Graziano of ESPN. And that was a little bit of a surprise. I mean, we knew he was a candidate out there. It's just we hadn't heard that anything was scheduled with him. So it was a little surprised that, oh, look, he interviewed today, that we didn't even know that was coming. It's not to me surprising necessarily that he was interviewed. It's just that we didn't hear about it. And then one other note that, to me, I think is relevant. I think you probably thought this was a candidate that we should be looking at. Ben Johnson, offensive coordinator from the Detroit Lions, has informed teams that he is staying in Detroit per sources. That was tweeted out by Tom Pelissero. So, this is an offensive coordinator who put together a really good offense with the Detroit Lions. A lot of people thought he was going to be a sought-after candidate, and he had some interviews scheduled, and I did an interview with the Panthers. Looks like, no, he was slated to interview with the Panthers Wednesday, but he's not going to. He's a guy that I would have loved for head coach, but he is now off the market at least for this year, and that is kind of what's gone on. There might be a few more things. So, Troy, what do you think about the Monti Ossenfort hire?
There's a lot of digest here. I'm in the more optimistic camp. I think, again, you can't get a whole lot of worse than Keim. Also, particularly the fact that this year Keim was kind of non-existent, and so someone around better than no one. And I think I'm really happy that's an outside hire. We've always talked about how Cardinals are very insular and very kind of hiring within, as that code reinforced. So it's nice that Bidwell seemingly is hearing the criticism and reacting accordingly to it. Monty wasn't my number one hope pick, but again, my ideas of the GM were like, it's all crapshoot kind of in the end. But like, I was kind of more in the Ian Cunningham, the guys who were from like the Eagles and the Ravens, because again, they were very analytics focused and has a strong background in that. Where Monty, I don't believe is, but I know he has a quote in his press conference today saying that they plan on using both tools to kind of do their scouting reports. But again, came from the Patriots, very well respected, well beloved throughout the league, and I'm optimistic. Some things I worry about is like, I guess he's interviewed a lot in the past and has never seemingly got the job, so that always kind of raises an eyebrow. But there's only 32 jobs, so someone's got to lose.
Right, yeah.
But yeah, no, he said all the right things today. I'm sure we'll go into parse out some of the quotes and go into those later. But I mean, it's a step in the right direction at least. We'll see who the head coach he brings on in, but right now, I mean, you can't really ask for anything more with the information we have.
Yeah, and I was with you. I think it's well documented here that I love what the Ravens do in terms of how they run things. I talk about that all the time. So I was, in the Ian Cunningham kind of, boat as well. That was my favorite candidate. And, I obviously knew Monti Ossenfort was a candidate and knew he was, well respected around the league. I was kind of neutral on him. Now, obviously, now he's hired, looked a little bit more into him. I watched the entire press conference actually twice. A few other interviews, and generally speaking, I like the hire. You raise a good point, and I mentioned this in my video. Why wasn't he hired by the Titans? Why wasn't he getting a job somewhere else? But there are only so many job openings. There's only 2 GM job openings this year. So yeah, like you said, someone has to lose out on that. But he does seem to have the right resume, what you're looking for, someone who worked his way up in multiple roles and kept moving up, was part of an organization that's known for having good processes. That's what I want to look for. And people will talk about the results, but I've used this quote all the time, or this example all the time. Like, you can't judge things completely by results because Jason Light came from the Cardinals, and not to say we had great processes. He was, a candidate who obviously had some things, ideas of his own that worked out. And, but if it is a crapshoot to some degree, or at least, you don't know until they're in the job. But if you're going to take a chance on someone who comes from an organization with good processes is, I think, where you look. So I agree. I saw some tweets about, why wasn't he interviewed for the Titans job? And Walter Mitchell, who writes for Revenge of the Birds, a friend of mine who I've done some podcasts with and such, responded. He actually did interview, but apparently Tennessee had not made a decision yet, and he was offered the job with the Cardinals, so he took the job. So maybe it was that situation. Who knows whether or not he was going to have a chance. Obviously, they hired Rand Carthen from the 49ers. I know for myself, the job I'm in now, I was offered a job, and I had an interview lined up somewhere else that I would have probably liked to go, but I had a job offer, so I took it. So I can relate to that. Who knows? I do suspect that maybe one of the reasons he didn't get the jobs in the past it is a couple things. One, I think, his last position with the Patriots was director of scouting. He didn't get to that next position there, director of player personnel. He got that with, he got one of those positions with the Titans, and then had an interview that year, but didn't get a job. And I will say this, now this is complete speculation. Maybe you can tell me what you think about this. Now, he came across as a little nervous. And I watched some other interviews with him, and he's not as smooth a communicator as Steve Keim was. But Steve Keim was in some ways smooth like a snake, right? So
used car salesman. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So I have to wonder if maybe, I watched it carefully, and I communicate for a living. I don't, I don't always get the words right myself. Words are hard, but there were a few mixed metaphors and a few gaffes that were minor, and inconsequential. He's not a polished speaker. He looked nervous. I wonder if that worked against him, but obviously that doesn't impact whether he can do the job well, right? If he knows what he's doing and he's a good leader, that doesn't matter at all. Like we said, Steve Keim was as smooth as it comes as a communicator. He was quick with the wit. He was smooth. He was schmoozy, but didn't mean he was a good GM, right? So, that to me isn't a thing, but I wonder if that came into play. Bottom line is, though, we've got a guy, we've hired him, has a good background. We're going to see what he can do. It seems like he has a good vision. I'm going to throw some quotes out there from the interview, and I'd like to get maybe your response to them and what you think about them. And how. So one of the quotes that a lot of people have kind of talked about is he talked about how he's going to build the roster. And he said, we're not just collecting talent. We're going to build a team. What are your thoughts on that?
That's funny because that's like seemingly in direct opposition to what Keim's kind of philosophy was. I mean, that brings me back to the Isaiah Simmons draft where, 2020, Kyler's second year, we didn't need to spend a premium draft pick on a hybrid safety that no one knows what to do. There was just he's a freak athlete. He'll fit somewhere. And that's definitely not at all how that works. So yeah, I think that was interesting. It's kind of seemed like he had some like points in his head that he already knew he wanted to like hit. And I think that kind of like saying to signify the changes from before. So yeah, I think that was interesting. And it's like, right, like sure, you can always take a chance occasionally on a freak, but it's usually on the late rounds where it's not late rounds, or we already have a pretty stacked roster where you can afford the luxury pieces, not, we've already gone through this many times, how stupid the Isaiah Simmons draft pick was. But yeah, no, again, it's all about processes and bringing those processes to the Cardinals, where it's seeming one of the complaints or the criticisms that a lot of the outside of the organization would say is just seemed like Steve Keim's drafts were a crapshoot every year. Like every year there's a different, it's like the new shiny object. There's like a different philosophy every year. I mean, like Danny Isabella year, you could tell he just did the PFF draft board because like if you look at like I think the top 4 of PFF's wide receivers, Andy Isabella was like 1, Hakeem Butler was like 3, like like just absurdly. It's like this dude just went down like this board, like that's all he did. But yeah, so it's exciting.
So real quick, just a logistical note for those in the chat. I realize my chat is frozen and I don't have any of your chat comments, but I just jumped on to the live stream on YouTube and I can see there's a ton of comments. So I apologize that I haven't been responding to the chat. I'm going to throw a quote out there. I'm going to have you talk about it for a second. I'm going to leave and come back, Troy. So I'll give you the next quote and then I'll be back in like 15 seconds.
Cool.
The next quote, and I know a lot of people latch onto this one. Ego will not be tolerated in this organization. We are going to look for focus-driven and people that are willing to put the team first at every step of the way. And I will add to this, kind of relate to that. He mentioned Buda Baker represents everything we want this organization to be. So I'm going to skip out for a second. I'll be right back. But once you pontificate on that, we'll try to get this fixed.
It's a spicy meatball there. For a while, I just thought the chat wasn't updating because no one likes us, apparently. I'm just kidding. So that quote was interesting. Primarily, I mean, a lot of people, I mean, let's be adults here. I think we all know the media's latching on to that quote and who they think it's targeted at, and that is Mr. Kyler Murray. But like, again, I'm a Kyler fan, so obviously my bias is probably showing a little bit, but I would go on the record and saying I don't think a GM who just got hired in his first ever public press conference is going to take shots at a quarterback he's stuck with for the next 3 years. Like, that doesn't sound like something a very smart man would do. So I think that was just more broad to the organization. I think Keim and it's professional athletes. Egos is part of it. That's what gets them to that level. I'm sorry, there's no professional athlete that's completely egoless or not selfish in a sense. So, but it's good to hear. Whether Kyler picks up on that or not, who knows? I mean, whatever. But it's a little disingenuous. I think some of the media's. I mean, they know why they're latching on to that. They want the clicks and all that stuff. And
right.
Kyler's low hanging fruit these days. But I think, again, I don't think he's taking veiled shots directly at a quarterback, because why? You're going to be stuck with him for 3 years. Why are you trying to make your life more difficult than it needs to be? But
yeah, no, and I agree with you. I think the people are going to want to make that about Kyler. They talked about it later. And someone asked him a follow-up question about that to elaborate on that. And he just talked about that. Then they also asked, was this something that came from Michael Bidwell's interviews with players? And he said it was. That basically what it really was about was accountability. Yet the players said they wanted more accountability that they needed. So I don't think it was intended to be just at Kyler. Though, again, fans will want to make it that. Real quick, I got back in here and a lot more chat comments loaded up. I don't see new ones loading, so I suspect there's something weird where, like, the ones that are there when I jump in, I don't know. So Easy No Steroids is here. Appreciate you being here. We've got Blazing Monolith. He's saying no to Flores. Mono 187, keep in mind that Force had 2 OCs at once. Interesting. That's dysfunction. Tony Height, today was a breath of fresh air for all Cardinals fans. I agree. Chris saying howdy, everyone. Thank you for being here. Let's see. We got JD from howdy from Texas. I lived in Texas for 5 years for grad school. I was in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Thank you for hanging out with us. We've got P. Trepek. Would not mind Flores. We've got let's see who else is in here that's just jumped in. See if there's anyone else that I haven't said hey to. Grimdark, hey, that's me on the quote. Yes, thank you for pointing out. That was a great quote. We've got JP here. No to Bieniemy. We've talked about that before. I'm also out on Bieniemy because of just things I've heard. I don't know. We've got Josh Espinal. Thank you for being here. I hope we take Vance Joseph if the Saints try to fleece us for a coach with 1 year left on his contract. I'm out on Vance Joseph myself as head coach. We've talked about before. I like Vance Joseph. I just don't want him as the head coach. Van, I would love, I think he's talking about Brian coming so he can make Kyler less of a baby. I'm a Kyler believer too, so I don't know about that, but I'm not out on Brian Flores like some people are, because I think there's some things he would bring culturally, and it's not about Kyler. I know I've heard the conversations about what he was like in Miami, but there was also some disconnect between him and the general manager and owner. And I think working with the GM who's from the Patriots system, I think there'd be more harmony. Do you want to jump in on that?
Oh, I mean, yeah. First, see Johnny Venables' tweet about this. It is hilarious. And he's like, what life would be like with Brian Flores for Kyler Murray. And it's just hilarious tweets, like this guy waking up in a prison bed from like a drill sergeant. It's hilarious. Yeah, the Brian Flores, it's like, I know he's a good coach, and he's like, that Miami defense was pretty legit when he was there. Mm-hmm. But like the way he handled the Tua situation is just so off-putting, and it was just kind of seemed like short-sighted and like a knee-jerk reaction. Like, he would pull Tua if he was playing bad for, like, he threw like 1 or 2 picks, pulled him, and then throw Ryan Fitzpatrick back out there. He would get hurt. Tua, now you're back in. Pull Tua. It was just like nonsensical. It's like, what are we doing here, man? Like, this is not how you treat a guy in a rookie contract. And now Kyler's not on his rookie contract anymore, so he kind of has a different set of rules. Like, he's professional, like, you have to play to a higher standard. But I don't know. I just did not like the way he handled the Tua situation. Also, he's like partly suing the Cardinals at the same time, so I don't know how that works.
I mean, it's a suit with the NFL. Steve Wilkes is on that, and with the Cardinals kind of part of that, and it's kind of a complicated situation. It's kind of weird. Yeah. That doesn't bother me so much. In fact, I don't know. I think it's a credit to the Cardinals that they're interviewing him despite that. In my opinion, they're like,
apparently they loved him. I think it was the Wilkes year, 2019 or something. They were interviewing him, and they loved him, and they I think almost pulled the trigger on it, but.
I mean, I also have heard that Tua was not the quarterback he wanted in the draft. that, he wanted Herbert, and, I don't know. So maybe that's part of why that happened. Anyone who's coming in here is going to have to come in here like signing a disclaimer or whatever that, yes, I want to coach Kyler Murray. So if he doesn't like Kyler Murray, right. So if he doesn't like Kyler Murray and want to work with Kyler Murray, he's not going to be hired.
And what if Kyler Murray gets along with him?
Yeah.
Like, who knows? Like, what if everyone's completely wrong on Kyler? Probably not. I mean, that's usually not how this works. But like, what if that works for him?
I mean, who knows? I think people, maybe the personalities mesh. I mean, Kyler's kind of a little bit of a, kind of a direct person, and a little I don't know, abrasive a little bit in some ways, and maybe that works with them. So who knows, right? I'm not. I think I'm not out on Brian Flores like some people are. Although there are some coaches I prefer to him, right? Real quick, let me just say hey to a few more people. And I'll say it looks like comments still aren't loading, so I'm going to say hi to the folks that are here. I apologize, I can't get to comments like I normally would. The streaming software is being weird, but some folks who've jumped in. Jordan P, thanks for being here. So hard to gauge how he will do. I do think it's not fair to pin bad picks on him, but then it's also not right to say he's a winner because he was a scout for Pats either. And I would generally agree with that. I don't. And here's the thing, and I keep using these terms, but it's not about. I mean, they say about being a winner or loser, and those are these vague kind of things. Again, for me, it's best practices and processes. What processes have you learned and practices have you learned? And then do you have the leadership, abilities and the interpersonal stuff? And, to me, it's not about he was a winner as much as he developed processes in an organization that I think does things well, right? The Patriots, especially when you talk about drafting defense and offensive line, they do that particularly well, areas that we need. So, with me, again, it's you're taking a chance on a guy who learned his processes somewhere that I think they have good processes. That's really kind of what it is. We've got Chris R. I'm cautiously optimistic about Monty. Thanks for being here. We've got Saltiest Gamer saying, what's up, everyone? We've got Brian Perkins, Elawan. Joe, you're the man. Thanks for all your hard work. Brian is such a kind person, always very supportive. I appreciate you, Brian. Thank you for being here. We have Cruz Aispuro, channel member. Thank you for your support. As long as we win, the head coach could be a cactus for all I care. Amen to that, right? Howard, thanks for being here. I wouldn't hold it against him for not getting a GM position. BA missed out before finally getting a head coach job. That worked out pretty darn good. You're right. Grimdark points out something. Jason Light came from the Patriots before us with the Cardinals. That's interesting, right? People are kind of saying, well, Patriots folks aren't successful, and as head coaches, Mike Vrabel has kind of been the most successful of them, and they haven't, Brian Flores is like the second most successful. So with the coaches, that's fair. With the GMs, you've got, the guy in Texas, with the Texans, that's maybe it's a little lukewarm on him, but Light came through there, so that's interesting to note. See, there's a few more folks. Kyler Murray apologists. Flores is an Amtrak trail derailment, so I guess you're against him. Let's see, and I think Daryl Gray, thanks for being here. Keim has been selling snake oil for years. We got level 7. I think Vance or Flores is getting the job. I don't think Vance is. I just don't. I don't know. Maybe you can comment on that.
No, I don't think so either. I think the external GM hiring kind of put the kibosh on that.
I would generally agree. I think that if they were hiring Vance, they were probably also going internal. In general, I like Vance. I like what kind of leader he is. I always enjoyed his press conferences. Although it was kind of funny, usually he always, whenever someone was asking a question, he always went before they're half ready. He's like, yep, right. Or, he's ready. He's waiting for them to finish. 3 words in, he knows what they're asking. He wants them to shut up so he can answer. But no, I think they're interviewing him as a courtesy. I think they're interviewing him to be able to say that they've, gone cast a wide net, and maybe they're sincere about considering him. But as I've said before, in the end, if nothing else, I think they're going to, some of the candidates they are going to interview are just going to are going to have a better plan and are going to have be better candidates than Vance Joseph. So I just think he's not going to end up getting the job. He talked a little bit about, wanting to build, keep everyone on the same page. He built how players, coaches, staff, wants a complete organizational understanding of what they're doing, and what they're trying to accomplish. Talk about whether you're a player or a coach or the person, who's taping up ankles or serving food. We all need to kind of know what we're doing on the same page. And for me, I think I've seen a lot of people who talk about, their concerns about organizational culture. That certainly seems to be the right kinds of things you want to hear. Now, saying it and doing it are two different things. But he also talked about trying to build a sustainable program. He said, we're trying to build a sustainable program here. This is not a short-term fix. So we want a coach that sees the big picture. What are your thoughts on that? Talking about wanting to do a sustainable program, not a short-term fix. Because I think a lot of fans in recent years have been talking about putting all the chips in and wanting to go for it. And I, as a fan, have not kind of been in that. I'm like, I want to build a sustainable program, right? So that's for me, music to my ears. But what are your thoughts about what he's saying in terms of the culture and his approach for building?
Well, the organizational alignment is desperately needed. I mean, with the Isaiah and Zaven drafts, those were 2 first rounds that didn't play. And famously in the Zaven Collins draft and the clips, this isn't a red shirt year, buddy. You're playing. Jordan right. Hicks and Devondre Campbell, or was Devondre Campbell on that year?
I think that was wasn't there.
Yeah, Jordan Hicks was all over the place, and it's just like, what is this? And again, it's the frustrating is like, well, why are we drafting players that Vance doesn't want to play? And another reason too why I don't want Vance, because if we do use our 3rd pick for Jalen Carter, Will Anderson, they're not going to see the field. So if Vance is there, so I think that is so desperately needed. And there's there was such a sprite from the beginning. They kind of it's like when they hired Cliff, it's like they didn't really let him grow. Like they just kind of had the kitty gloves and they never took them off. And whether Kimes liked that control over that or whatever, but it wasn't working out. So I'm happy that there seems to be alignment on that. In terms of sustainable, I mean, absolutely. You always want teams like who knows how like your window is going to be open. So I think if you don't have to push all the chips in, like who knows how long this Rams rebuild is going to take. It could take a very long time. And do you want to have 3 or 4 years of awful, terrible football? I mean, like the Texans have been tail spinning now for after that last playoff exit, or no, even before that. I mean, Deshaun Watson had like a 3-win season, I believe, right? Like
it was something bad, yeah.
So like you don't want that. You can't push all your chips in because sometimes you don't know when that window's coming back. Quarterbacks can leave pretty easily now.
Yeah.
Look at the Ravens. We talk about how much we love them. Who knows what that team's gonna look like when Lamar Jackson doesn't come back? If he does, like Tyler Huntley's not the answer. So
yeah,
I think it's important to have players, teams, and like again a unified culture moving in one direction as a unit. Because if you don't, then if you lose your playoff window or or your Super Bowl window, like it might not come back for a long time.
Yeah. And I think, people like to talk about the Rams as the example. They made the big moves and they won a championship, and that can happen, right? And maybe it being this is a little bit going back, but being Arizona fans, the Diamondbacks did that for their World Series and then struggled for a long time after that. That's tempting as a fan to want to kind of go all in, but like it's such a risky proposition, because if you miss, then you set yourself up to be in a really messy rebuild, an ugly rebuild that takes a lot. Just you have to eat a bunch of dead cap. You have to, you have all these players, older players, and I'm just a believer. Like what you need to do is build a team that can get to the playoffs more often than they don't. And if you get to the playoffs, you have a puncher's chance. I mean, Philadelphia
1,000%.
won with Nick Foles, right? You so many times you see, yes, of course, a team that has someone like Tom Brady, you know, and like the Patriots is going to win a lot if you have the GOAT, or if you have Pat Mahomes, you have a better chance. But if you have a team that can get their consistently, you just need to get hot at the right time, right? And you saw the Giants won a couple Super Bowls that way. The Ravens won, you know, with Trent Dilfer that way. Like, what you want to do is build a team that can get into the playoffs more years than not, and you're going to have a chance. If you put all your chips in on that one shot to try to build a super team, it might end up like the Rams, but might also end up like the Eagles did back with like Nami Asuma or whatever his name is, the cornerback, and they signed the super team of, I think, you know, Terrell Owens, I think, might have been on the team if I remember correctly. Like the Eagles did that like in the early 2000s. Try to build the super team, and it didn't work, right? So, you know, it works when it works, but I'd rather, you know, build a sustainable team and have those chances, you know, like that. So that's my take. So I like that.
If NFL season was like, you know, NASCAR or like soccer, where you just accumulate points throughout a season, then whoever has the most at the end is the winner, then like that, of course, then putting chips in makes more sense. I mean, but it's not. Like, look what baseball, the Dodgers were the best team in the regular season, bounced out in the first round because, you know, they had a bad series. And you can't really have that methodology like, in the football, because once playoffs happen, it's, you know, gloves are off. Like, just what happened this weekend. Like, look how many close games. Like, the Bills almost lost to Dolphins on a third string quarterback.
Right.
The Bengals almost lost to the Ravens on their second string quarterback. Like, it becomes a whole different game. It's like they say in basketball, like playoff basketball, the math changes. It's like down to 8 guys, and whoever's got the best 8 guys wins the series. And NFL's kind of like that in a way, where it just comes different. Margins come tighter, and so if you can just get there, and obviously divisions kind of help that or not. So if you have in a weaker division, it's a little bit easier, but hopefully in terms of our division, that the Rams and Seahawks are setting, and I say Seattle because I think this year's an aberration. They're going to suck. All right. And they are. I'm sorry. That's me just being spiteful. So yeah, who knows? The powers could be shifting.
For sure. Yeah. So, you know, I like that approach as well. I just, if everyone, I can see your comments I'm watching comments on the YouTube video, but I can't pin them, FYI. Someone mentioned, you know, there was a video that I shared this on Twitter after it was shared by Rashad Haynes in the Discord. There was a video from the Patriots organization from a few years back when Ossenfort was part of the organization, and he was featured a lot. So it was really interesting to see that. And, you know, Bub is saying here in the comments, I watched a video with the new GM on the Patriots channel, and he said, rule number 1 is don't draft or scout with your heart, be real and do what's best for the team. Right. I like those kinds of approaches. Right. So, you know, I like what we're seeing there. Right. Easy No Steroids is saying, read my comment, Jokimo. Well, let's see. Hitman Monty is here to see a-holes and elbows. Okay. Is that the comment? I can't pin it, so I apologize for that. So I liked, you know, and it's, I heard I'm going to butcher this. Someone said this in Discord that again, I'm going to totally butcher this, but like, you know, would you rather take Steve Kime making the pick or like a monkey flipping a coin? Right. You know, like, so like
coin every time.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, but like, you know, even if he's an average competent GM, it's an improvement. I think he can be better, but that's an improvement. Well, like, that was Grimdark again. He's saying, yes. So like Grimdark's just featuring all the great quotes tonight. So, well, like, in all seriousness, I know this is going to sound a little bit overly optimistic, maybe, but I really think there is the potential for this to be a pivotal point in this organization's history. Look at it this way: we have a new GM. after having a really bad GM for a long time. Whatever you might think, we have a franchise quarterback in place, but this new GM is coming in with some really good draft capital to work with. The third overall pick, the third pick, in subsequent rounds, plus 3 compensatory picks, 1 in the third, 1 in the fifth, and 1 in the sixth, most likely. Like, that's some good draft capital to work with. Like, if they get this right, this could be a major turning point. New GM and some really good draft capital to work with, right? And a team that, if you can just fix the offensive line and add some pieces on defense, I think is ready to contend in the NFC, at least, right? To compete in the NFC. I think there's a lot of potential to that. Real quick, Sam Sakaria has a super chat. Sam, I can't pin your super chat because the streaming software is being weird, so I really apologize for that. But Sam has asked a question. Joe, what do you think about Ken Dorsey as our potential head coach? Troy, I'll let you get a start. What are your thoughts on Ken Dorsey? And then I'll jump in on that after you share your thoughts.
He's the Bills OC right now, right?
Yes.
Or is that Leslie Frazier? Okay. Yeah. Leslie Frazier's the defensive coordinator for the Bills,
yes,
right?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, but like, I feel like the Bills are kind of stuttering a little bit this year, and that whether that's Josh Allen, like Josh Allen's kind of regressing a bit, injury or not, I don't know. I think Daboll was clearly the crown jewel there. I mean, aside from the head coach. So I'm always a little wary. Like, I always get nervous about like coaching trees getting picked too clean, and you want to be because I feel like that happened to us with Wilkes and the Bills head coach, because they were both at Carolina, and I'm blanking on the Bills head coach name. Sean McDermott. He was the DC. I believe Wilkes was like the linebackers coach, then went to DC, came to us, correct? Or it was like a weird thing, but like we didn't get the good one. We got the rotten tomato, and they got the crown jewel, to put it frankly. Which is, hey, Wilkes is turned out to be, be an all right coach, I believe. But which, I mean, it's so funny. We were talking earlier in the season. We're like, when people asked, do we feel like we screwed with Steve Wilkes? And we're both like, no, he hasn't done anything since then. So like, I don't feel like we screwed up. And then he ended up being a pretty good interim coach. So it's like, well, guess we're wrong.
I follow some Panthers content creators. I know Grandizer also follows PMP, I think, podcast. They do some really good work. I did a thing with them when we played them. Really great YouTube channel for Panther stuff. But I follow them on Twitter, and I'll tell you, Panthers fans a lot, like, they like Wilkes. A lot of them want him as head coach. Like, so take that for what it's worth, right? So yeah. Yeah, good.
Yeah. But yeah, so Ken Dorsey, I don't know. I can always wary of getting the wrong, catching the hot potato, essentially. I think the options we have now, because Payton's still in it. I know people have gotten a little quiet, but he's still head-to-head favorite with Flores now. And Benjamin Albright, the Denver NFL kind of insider, who knows a lot apparently, because he talks about every team.
Yeah,
he thinks that our hiring of Monty only strengthens our chance at Payton, not weakens it. Which some people thought, oh, they hired a GM, Sean's not going to go there because he wants total control. But every other team he's linked with has a GM, so I think that point is kind of null and void at this point. So.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I think you make a good point about kind of, those coaching trees at some point, they've kind of gotten a little too bare. I think Ken Dorsey, my thoughts on him, I mean, it's the resume you want, right? An offensive coordinator with a really good team. For me, I feel like maybe he's another year or two away before from really being a guy who should be a head coach. I think the potential's there. I think he probably, though, needs a little more seasoning there, is my opinion. For the reasons, kind of some of the reasons you talked about, the whole thing about Josh Allen regressing. We've talked about this a lot, the shifts in defense in the NFL. So you wonder how much of it is that's really not so much him regressing, but is really just like most quarterbacks struggling unless they play a certain style or have an offensive scheme that can kind of overcome that. Like the Dolphins actually, when they were clicking at their offense, really did a good job of
insane.
nullifying that. So for me, he's not the top of my list. I think there's people I like better than him. D'Amico Ryans. I wish Ben Johnson were still, a candidate, but he's not. Obviously, Sean Payton. But if they ended up hiring him, I wouldn't be like up in arms. It's just there's other people I like. So I think he's a name worth discussing, right? He certainly deserves conversation. But I think maybe he's a year or two from being ready. But we'll see, right? So that's a good thought there. So there's a lot of talk about what to expect. I think though, and I shared that tweet earlier, but I think Cardinals fans need to prepare themselves that this is not going to be a big splash free agency. I think what you're going to see in free agency is you're going to see some offensive linemen. You're probably going to see some players that have history with whoever they hire as coach, because you always see that they bring in kind of some journeyman veterans who come in to help kind of
establish the culture,
expedite the implementing of the system, things like that. So I think what you're going to see is they're going to hit on a few key positions. I think you're going to also see that they're not going to go with big time splash signings, and they're going to go with guys who have history with that coach.
Do you think Hop stays or goes?
And that's a great question, because people are commenting on it like, hey, we're going to have even more draft capital when they trade him. So I want to actually read a quote from Michael Bidwell, because he was asked about that in the press conference. And I think his response is actually, he doesn't say any much, but it's still to me kind of telling. So someone was asked, there's been speculation about DeAndre Hopkins getting traded. Is that going to happen? And, when they were asking Monty, they said, but if you want to, comment on this, obviously, Mr. Bidwell, and Monty just looked at Michael Bidwell and did not. He wisely deferred. But Michael stated, we talked about a number of things, but those are just some of the things that he, Ossenfort, is going to be evaluating. So as he said, he's only been in the building for a few hours. He doesn't even know his way around. So I think he'll be working on that in the coming weeks. And I'm sure we'll talk about that more. Like if you have no intention, right? If you have no intention of trading Hopkins, you're gonna say, we're not in the business of getting rid of great players. We love what Hopkins brings. We don't have any plans to trade him. But to me, that answer suggests it's going to happen. What do you think?
Yeah, they're throwing it out there. They're suggesting it because they want to see what offers they're going to get. Yeah. They want to see what teams are going to throw at them. I mean, hell, every Saints fan says that's give us Hopkins, we'll give you Payton, and Hopkins in a set, whatever magical numbers they want to throw to get Payton. Who knows? So yeah, I think if, again, I don't think as long as they don't get fleeced or gives Hopkins away for pennies, then I'm for the move away, because I think you got to rip the Band-Aid off. It's either now or next year. So, and again, where he's coming from, the Patriots never had a dominant receiving core. It was like Julian Edelman, Wes Welker was like their backbone of their receiver core for a long time. So maybe his first move is probably going to get Andy Isabella back, unfortunately. But
they had Randy Moss for a short stretch.
Yeah,
that was great. Yeah. But no, they always, and that part of that's their offense. They attack the middle of the field, so they always worked with the tight ends and the slot receivers, and didn't really emphasize his outside receivers. So that's the Patriots kind of offense, and that's their coaching. I think like I love DeAndre Hopkins as a player. I loved him when he was with the Texans. I just always appreciated the way he played the game. He seems like a good person in the community, and things like that. But I've said this, before, he's going to be 32 years old by the time this team is realistically ready to make any waves, right, in 2024.
Yeah, I don't blame him for wanting to move. Like, he's only got 1 or 2 years left of peak, of his career. Maybe he might want to be one of those guys that goes out early than later. So you got to maximize it
And I have to wonder, and this just occurred to me, just watching his teammate, longtime teammate and friend JJ Watt retire in a way that, listen, I love everything that the organization did for Watt, what the 49ers did for him. I'm not a 49ers fan, but much respect to what they did at the game. And I loved what we got to see on Hard Knocks, the behind the scenes stuff. And JJ Watt is a rare human being in so many ways. But I think he watched him go out with the Cardinals on a losing season.
Right? Getting blown out in that game too.
Right. And I think as much as he loves Watt, I have to wonder if he's looking at it and thinking, that's not what I want for my last couple of years. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 1,000%.
Get me to a contender. And, people have speculated, and I'm not the first person to say this, but the Patriots actually would be an interesting destination.
Yeah, but are they going to be a contender, though?
They're not a top contender, but Belichick, you never count him out. I mean,
for sure. Just that division's so tough.
It is. Yeah.
And Mac thrown to you. Oh, Lord have mercy, Mac Jones.
Now, I've seen Howard mentioned this in the chat, D-Hop for Payton. And I've seen other people say that, but like Hopkins has to waive a no trade clause. And I would be shocked if he was willing to go to New Orleans. I just don't see that happening. They are going to be in cap hell this next year, like $60 million over if they don't cut players. They don't have a quarterback, you believe. Like if he wants to leave the Cardinals because it's a mess or they're not ready to win, the Saints don't even have a quarterback and they don't have a pick to take that quarterback this year, I believe. So like they're in worse situation, right? So for the Cardinals perspective, if you can trade D-Hop for Payton, don't have to give up your first round pick. That's great. But I just don't see that as happening. But I do, I think Hopkins is going to move. I don't hate it. I would like it if we could keep him, but if he wants to go, then, I hope he goes somewhere and gets, and is successful and we get some draft picks that we can build with. So yeah, I don't know. Other thoughts on this, anything else? Like I kind of mentioned some quotes from the press conference. Was there anything else that stood out to you about the press conference or thoughts on the Ossenfort hiring, what it means, how he's going to approach things, or anything else that you want to clear from your notebook we haven't had a chance to talk about?
Just one thing was, I know a lot of people were kind of concerned, worried about like some of the Titans stuff, like the AJ Brown trade or the Titans kind of inability to draft really that great in this past two draft classes. You have to remember what his job title is. It was like player personnel. And if you look up, I think I saw this on, I believe it was K1 since day one's Twitter feed about what that job title entails. His job's strictly just getting free agents and scouting other players on teams into the door, into playing. And if you look what the Titans were doing, they were very good at that, at getting bodies in to fill, because Titans were like probably one of the most, like, if not the most injured team, like next to us, like right there this year.
Yeah.
And they ran it till the end. I mean, they almost beat the Jags on the last game to get into the playoffs with Josh Dobbs. Like, they were really good at just filling bodies and getting them going and playing, well. That's probably, and that's a Rabel thing too. But so that has to make you feel good about it, that like the job title he had, like he was very good at that position.
Yeah, I remember when they promoted Adrian Wilson and Quentin Harris, kind of the interim kind of co-GMs or whatever, looking at their original job titles, and there's the director of player personnel and developer or director of pro personnel or something. There's these two titles that are often used.
Yeah.
And I forget which one is which, but one tends to be focused more on scouting in the draft, and the other is more focused on free agency and scouting other teams' players and things like that. That's kind of loosely how those two divide up. So it sounds like he was more the free agency and scouting other teams' players side of things. So yeah, so we'll see how it works out. I like what I saw. I thought he came across as sincere, thoughtful, Johnny Venerable tweeted about how, every person who asks a question in the media, he always responded with saying their name back to him as hell. It's nice to meet you, and that matters, as that those kinds of little things matter, and that Steve Keim maybe didn't always treat people that way. I liked what I heard in terms of his approach and how he plans to approach building the team. I liked everything I heard. And, and I liked that, again, he seemed like a genuine person who I think people will respond to that much more than they will to the snake oil kind of Steve Keim, right? So I'm optimistic. We got to see, we have to see how it works out over time. He's got to implement those processes, and they've got to work. We've got to get the right coach. But I am cautiously optimistic, right? So, yeah.
I wonder what Cliff Kingsbury thought when Frank Reich interviewed. He's like, if you wanted someone to lose down the stretch, you had him in the building. Like, what are we doing, guys? Come on now.
Let's talk about this just a little bit. Like Frank Reich, a couple of the D'Amico Ryans is a candidate I know I like, and I think you view him positively. Yeah. And then obviously Brian Flores, a defensive-minded coach that people don't view as favorably. I like Brian Flores. I'm maybe an outlier. I like the fact that he basically just got to work under Mike Tomlin for a while, so I think he's going to pull something from that. Regardless of where you go there, like you're going to need an offensive coordinator. So Frank Reich isn't maybe he wasn't great as a head coach. He had his moments, but he had also had some issues. But maybe if you're going with the defensive coordinator, they interviewed Frank Reich and you bring him as offensive coordinator. He's been successful there. How would you feel about Reich as an offensive coordinator with one of those defensive type coaches?
I think I'd be okay with that. The thing that worries me is when the Colts offense was good. They were running the ball effectively and well, and they had a pretty good offensive line. I don't know if we're gonna have the personnel to do that per se. But I mean, I like that Eagles team was good. He does well with the quarterbacks. I mean, he kind of just got let down by Wentz there in the end, which is the story of everyone's life. I'm okay. He doesn't fire me up. You know who does fire me up, and name's been circled as Todd. Have you been seeing this, Joe? I was on it early. Todd Monken. His name's been circled around. He's not going to go. He's going to stay at Georgia. But
okay.
But people are talking about him. I was like, I was on it early.
There you go. You were an early adopter, as they say.
Early adopter.
Nice.
But the thing that worries me, like out of all the playoff coaches, 8 left. 7 of them are offensive head coaches, and like there's only one defensive one. So
yeah,
that trend is slightly worrying.
And that's the way the league has gone in. So we talked about this I think last week. I'm not completely out on the defensive coach thing, but you've got to get it right. You got to get the personnel right. But like, if you have a good defense, you're a lower variance team, right? You can win ugly games, and you can win games when your offense is on, right? And so I like that. It's not as sexy as the high flying offense, but I feel like it's there's less variance, right? The standard deviation is lower, statistically speaking. But I also like going with an offensive coach. So, obviously though, Sean Payton is the big fish, in the sea, and everyone's talking about. And, you mentioned that Benjamin Albright, who I follow on Twitter, and seems to, even though he's focusing on the Broncos, seems to be connected and have, knowledge about what's going on, thinks that that's going to increase their chances because I think one of the things they're saying is, they're all Belichick guys or Parcells guys, right? And maybe that's it. But then someone else tweeted, who I won't say who, because this person I think blocks too many people and gets in their DMs and doesn't deserve to be mentioned by name, tweeted that supposedly people in Payton's camp say that he's upset that the Cardinals hired a GM without consulting him. But you brought up the point that like all the GM positions are open now. So we were the only place where he was going to maybe potentially have some say in that. So like he doesn't get to pick his GM anywhere other than picking the job, I guess, where he likes the GM. So
I don't understand how that guy has a job because he's just the worst person on the planet. We all know who we're talking about.
Yes,
Rhymes with Barecki or whatever you want to say.
Yes, used to work for the Cardinals media and blocks everyone. I used to be blocked, and I literally never commented on anything he ever did or replied. Somehow I got blocked, and I don't know why. And I kind of raised a big stink on Twitter, even tagged Mark Dalton of the Cardinals, just like, hey, you it's a bad look for you. A guy represents you is doing this, and a bunch of people commented and whatever, and like, yeah, I've been blocked too. And then I'm not blocked by him, so I don't know. I don't know how or why I got blocked. I
made it to the ninth ring of hell.
Right. I have to wonder if literally like his boss, Mark Dalton, saw the tweet and because a bunch of people, not because it's me, but because a bunch of people commented on it and had a talk with him. You got to stop. I don't know.
Yeah. He doesn't work for them anymore. I think
he doesn't.
Does he work for the radio station or I don't know what he does.
I think he's got his own podcasting. So anyway, yeah.
Oh, have fun with that.
Yeah.
I don't know with Payton, he was just on the herd and he didn't mention he was interviewing the Cardinals, but he's supposed to. And people kind of took that. I mean, who knows? His odds are still co-favorites with Flores, 350. But again, the Vegas coaches hired and fired polls are always so like Cliff was the favorite to be fired for like 2 years in a row. Right. So, a blind squirrel finds a nut every once in a while. So.
And I'm not into gambling or betting much, but I don't know a ton about that stuff, but I know just a little bit. And I know those Vegas lines are part of function of what they think will happen, but they're also part of function of where the betting action is and trying to influence that.
Mm-hmm.
So 1,000%. I think Brian Flores being like one of the top people in the betting, for example, is part because he is a serious candidate with those connections, but it's also part that so many people are now starting to bet on him. They want to minimize their liability if he is the head coach, right? By making the odds, the payout less, right?
The interesting and maybe slightly worrying thing about Flores is like, he's only been linked to us for head coach, like as a head coach. Like, I don't think he's linked to anywhere else. Yeah. So that should be like, why is he not going anywhere else? Like, why does he only want to come to us? Like, or whatever, that's weird. I don't know if I like that.
Yeah. Let me throw another wrinkle out there. He's not a defensive coordinator right now.
Right? No, he's a linebackers coach, Steelers, right?
Right. Yeah. And maybe some other thing added on assistant, whatever. So, you see it sometimes where people come in an interview for the head coaching position, but then end up becoming it's also an interview for a coordinator. So there's also the chance that he ends up being a coordinator, right? So candidate. So depending on who they are. So
it's interesting too, because like the rumors was Sean Payton and Vic Fangio were teaming up, creating a super team of coaches. And, but he interviewed separately kind of as a DC coordinator for the Panthers. And he's like, I think it's the only interview I've ever heard of him going, which is interesting. I don't know if that thing's still happening, or maybe he's just going to get a job that he can get, or
Yeah, there's a point where the jobs start running out, So
I think Johnny Venerable kind of put it good as like, we're not hearing much about like Bidwell's kind of keeping things close to the chest. Like no one really knew if Cliff was going to get fired. Some people had good ideas, but no one really knew. No one knew or Monty was going to be the candidate until like it was announced. So who knows?
Yeah. We'll see. There's a lot going on. It is an exciting time though. Like we said, ding dong, the witch is dead. Keim isn't the general manager. Someone other than Steve Keim is going to be making the picks this year. Like to me, like we said earlier, give me the monkey flipping the coin over Steve Keim right at this point. So, like that's exciting. We're going to have a new head coach. Yes, there's some apprehension about who it's going to be. And certainly if it is, someone that is disappointing, it could be a very wah moment for fans, but there's still some excitement and, there's a lot coming ahead. We're going to be talking about it as it comes down the pipeline. And one other thing I want to, before we get ready to get out of here, because we've gone over an hour, Mock Draft Mondays starting this next Monday. I'm going to start putting some stuff out on social media about it, but we will start Mock Draft Mondays next week on Monday, Monday night. So watch for that. If you haven't been part of Mock Draft Mondays, it's a lot of fun. You're going to be able to submit your mock drafts to me on Twitter or in Discord, and I will put, if you submit a mock draft, it will get up on the screen. So it's a lot of fun. I'll have some guest hosts rotating. Troy's going to be joining me for some episodes, and we'll kind of rotate folks in. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So definitely watch for that. As we get out of here, Troy, anything you want to mention, shout out before we get out of here?
No, I do want to say, like, that was even talked about. The last episode of Hard Knocks was kind of sad. I felt bad, like, especially for Cliff. I mean, I don't feel that bad again. He's in Thailand apparently now with his wonderful looking girlfriend. So if that's sad, then sign me up 1,000 times. But I was surprised, that they showed him addressing his coaches, saying, sorry. Like I felt, he definitely got the raw end of the deal a little bit, and the JJ Watt stuff is great. That's great to see. And I just want to say, for how much crap we kind of gave it and how they kind of skirted some things, it's a really well done program. Like, even my girlfriend likes watching it, and she hates watching football. She could not care less, but she loves watching Hard Knocks because she likes seeing what the players and the storylines and kind of all that stuff, and it's fun. So I think other Hard Knocks is good, and I hope you guys all watched it, because I mean, I might even watch more now.
Yeah,
like the other teams who I don't even really care about, but
I watch it every preseason at least, and I watch every episode. And I agree. Like, sometimes it's a little, they don't give you any substance in some episodes, but to me as a Cardinals fan, I still loved watching every bit of it anyway. And I agree with you. That last episode was really good. Seeing the JJ Watt stuff, hit all the feels, right? Just hit all the feels. I'm with you on that. And yeah, like, it's, you don't feel sorry for a man who is wealthy, dating an Instagram model, and is now going to get paid, to do whatever. But he seemed like a good dude. Things I've heard seen on social media, people who work in random positions in the organization said, dude, he was really good to all of us. And it felt like maybe he got the, a little bit of the raw end of the deal. Seems like a good dude. Hope he ends up getting, do
you think he works this year, or do you think he takes the year off?
Well, he was quoted as telling teams he's not interested. Like, people reached out to him about being the offensive coordinator, and he said he's not at this time interested. Maybe he'll get, a job late. Maybe someone will bring him on late. If I had to guess, I'd say he probably is going to take a year off. Live his best life, as well he should.
I'm curious, like, if he's even going to be do people even want him after you take a year off? You kind of fade in. Like, do people want like I feel like Jim Caldwell, it was like, very respected head coach, offensive coordinator. Yeah. He can't get a job, but his name floats around, but he's hadn't had a job in a couple of years. He almost have to strike while the iron's hot, and keep it going.
I think 1 year off, he'll get it. Someone will bring him in as offensive coordinator. I think he's. People keep saying that the Patriots for him, and I think that makes a ton of sense. As a place for him. So I think
McVay wants him, which that would just be hilarious.
Right, that would be right. So I think he'll end up somewhere. I think he'll take one season off. I think he'll come back. I do think he'll get a job somewhere. And I think he's, people, this isn't, again, this is not news I'm saying here. He said he doesn't want to go back to college. He doesn't want to do that. He's not going to be at college. Maybe he might be a coordinator, but I think even if you're a coordinator there, you have to be involved in the recruiting stuff. So he probably wants none of that. I think he's going to come back in the NFL as a coordinator somewhere. And maybe eventually become a head coach again. And, we talked about that before, maybe do a good job once he's learned, had some seasoning. But, so we'll see, for sure. I want to real quick and remind everyone, listen, folks in the chat, thank you all for being here. I mentioned this earlier, but if you came in late, the software or the website I use for streaming is being weird. So it's not loading your comments. So I haven't been able to put new comments on the on the up on the stream, but I've been reading your comments as I can lately. So thank you all. I apologize if I didn't say hi to everyone, but I definitely appreciate you. This has been a lot of fun, hanging out with you guys. And there's going to be a lot more coming. We're excited. So I'm going to go ahead and throw up the shout outs to the channel members. And then we're going to get out of here. Thank you all and everyone. Peace.